It's the longest, loudest argument in modern history, a conflict that outlived revolutions, toppled empires, bankrupted superpowers, and split the world in two. For over a century, capitalism and socialism weren't just economic theories. They were battle lines behind every patriotic speech, every worker uprising, every recession, and every proxy war. This debate shaped our world, but here's what no ideology influencer will tell you. Neither system ever worked the way the textbooks promised. Not once, not anywhere. And when the pressure hit war, famine, inflation, collapse, the truth revealed itself with brutal clarity. Welcome to the money behind wars, where money, power, and history collide. And nothing is ever as simple as it seems. Our story begins long before the words capitalism or socialism were ever spoken. For most of history, the economy wasn't an economy at all, it was survival. Monarchs claimed divine right. Landlords owned nearly everything. Peasants produced just enough to avoid starvation. Progress moved slower than glaciers. Life was a zero-sum game. If one person rose, another fell. Wealth came from land, labor, and conquest. The idea that ordinary people could grow rich through trade or innovation would have sounded like madness then. The Industrial Revolution blew the world open. In late 1700s Britain, a pressure cooker of coal, iron, capital, and restless ambition. Machines replaced muscle. Factories replaced workshops. A new kind of power emerged, the power of private capital. For the first time, individuals could invest, risk, and own at a scale once reserved for kings. Productivity exploded. Wages rose for some, while misery deepened for others. Inequality widened faster than any society had ever seen. Pollution choked cities. Children worked 12-hour shifts. Slums bred disease. But one undeniable fact remained. Capitalism produced more goods, more wealth, more speed than the world had ever known. This was the moment socialism was born, not as a utopian dream, but as a desperate reaction to industrial capitalism's brutality by the mid-1800s. Thinkers like Karl Marx and Friedrich Engels looked at the smokestacks, the worker riots, the factory floors stained with sweat and blood, and concluded the system itself was the crime. They saw capitalist wealth as stolen labor extraction disguised as opportunity. They argued that if workers collectively owned the factories, if profits were shared, if production served human needs rather than private gain, society would finally become fair. No more exploitation. No more cycles of boom and bust. Just rational planning and equal dignity. It sounded clean, elegant, moral, and for millions living beneath the gears of early capitalism. It sounded like justice, but theory is one thing. Real life is another. The first serious attempt at socialism on a national scale didn't happen in a classroom. It happened in the ashes of an empire. After the 1917 Russian Revolution, Lenin inherited a starving, illiterate, and backward country. The Tsar was dead. The old elite were gone. Suddenly, a vast territory of 150 million people needed a new operating system. The Soviets built one: state ownership of land, factories, banks, and resources. Bureaucrats set prices. Production targets replaced profit motives. Private business was wiped out. In theory, it promised perfect equality and efficiency. In practice, it created chaos. Without market prices, planners didn't know what people wanted or how much to produce. Without competition, factories didn't innovate. Without personal reward, workers had no reason to exceed the minimum. Shortages became normal. Lines became culture. And agriculture, the backbone of the economy, collapsed into famine. Lenin eventually retreated, allowing limited private trade just to keep the country alive. Yet, something strange happened, despite its failures. Socialism remained seductive because capitalism wasn't exactly looking good either. By the early 20th century, capitalism had delivered immense growth and wild instability. Speculation ran rampant. Trusts dominated industries. The wealthy lived like modern royalty while millions scraped by. The system was efficient at creating wealth, but terrible at distributing it. This imbalance detonated in 1929. The U.S. stock market imploded, and capitalism suffered its most catastrophic failure. The Great Depression wasn't a recession, it was a global economic heart attack. Banks collapsed. Unemployment hit 25%. Entire financial systems were wiped out to millions. Capitalism looked not just flawed, but fatal. So by the 1930s, the world faced an uncomfortable truth. Neither system worked as advertised. Socialism promised equality, but delivered scarcity. Capitalism promised prosperity, but delivered collapse. And then came the moment that changed everything. World War II. The war forced every major economy to test its system under maximum pressure. The Soviet Union, despite its inefficiencies, mobilized its entire population with terrifying speed and discipline. State control allowed it to redirect all resources toward survival. Meanwhile, capitalist nations like the United States transformed into industrial supermachines, proving how powerful private innovation could be when backed by national coordination. When the war ended, the scoreboard wasn't ideological anymore, it was measured in GDP, infrastructure, growth, and living standards. From 1945 to 1991, the world became a laboratory. On one side, the Soviet bloc's central planning, state control, suppressed markets. On the other, the United States and its allies regulated capitalism, private enterprise, but with safety nets born from Depression-era lessons. This was the real experiment. Not the manifestos or the speeches, but millions of people living with the consequences. The results were dramatic and painful in the Soviet Union. The early decades brought rapid industrialization. Illiteracy fell. Housing expanded. Military power soared. But beneath the surface, the system was cracking. Without price signals, the economy drifted into absurd inefficiency. Factories met quotas by producing unusable goods. Farms delivered rotten harvests, and innovation stagnated. By the 1970s, the USSR was decades behind in consumer technology. A country that could build rockets couldn't produce a decent refrigerator. Capitalism, meanwhile, adapted. After the Great Depression, governments introduced regulation, deposit insurance, antitrust laws, Social Security, and unemployment benefits. Capitalism didn't become fair, but it became survivable. It learned from its mistakes, and that adaptability became its ultimate weapon. By the 1980s, the gap was undeniable. Western living standards surged while the Soviet economy stalled. The Cold War wasn't won by ideology. It was won by performance. When the Berlin Wall fell in 1989, the debate seemed settled. The Soviet Union wasn't defeated by bombs or invasions. It was defeated by empty shelves, broken incentives, and an economy that could no longer keep up. A system designed to eliminate inequality had produced new elites, party bosses, and bureaucrats, while ordinary citizens waited in line for bread. But capitalism's victory lap didn't last long, because while the Cold War ended, the economic contradictions didn't. By the 1990s and 2000s, capitalism evolved again, this time into something no 19th century theorist could have predicted. Finance exploded. Global supply chains stretched across continents. Credit flowed like water. Inequality soared again, this time on a scale reminiscent of the Gilded Age. Corporations became transnational powers. Entire economies grew dependent on debt, speculation, and asset bubbles. The 2008 financial crisis hit a stark reminder that capitalism's instability never really disappeared. It just came back wearing new clothes. Meanwhile, socialism re-emerged not in the old Soviet form, but as something softer, more nostalgic. Calls for wealth taxes, nationalized healthcare, free education, and stronger unions returned. Younger generations, facing housing crises and stagnant wages, began questioning whether capitalism still worked for anyone but the wealthy. The debate was reborn, but with a twist. This time, almost nobody wanted pure capitalism or pure socialism. History had made the trade-offs painfully clear. Look at modern Scandinavia, often mislabeled as socialist. These countries have free markets, private enterprise, and global corporations. But they also have high taxes, strong social protections, and powerful unions. It's capitalism with guardrails, a mixed economy, engineered to dampen inequality while preserving innovation. Now look at the United States, capitalist powerhouse with tremendous invention and global influence, but also staggering wealth gaps, decaying infrastructure, and a shrinking middle class. Then look at China, the world's largest authoritarian capitalist economy. Beijing calls it socialism with Chinese characteristics. But what it really resembles is state-directed capitalism. Private firms driving growth, with the government controlling strategic sectors. Markets are allowed to flourish only when they serve national priorities. And yet, even China faces the same contradictions: debt-driven growth, housing bubbles, demographic decline. When you step back, the truth is almost embarrassingly simple. Every major economy today is a hybrid, a blend of markets and state power, incentives and protections, freedom and control. Not because ideologies failed, but because reality forced compromise. When systems met real human behavior, ambition, greed, fear, laziness, creativity, neither theory held up cleanly. And that's the uncomfortable lesson. Economic systems don't shape people nearly as much as people shape. Economic systems. Human nature doesn't disappear under socialism or capitalism. It just expresses itself differently. Think you know who profits from war? Subscribe. I'll reveal what they don't want you to see.